Hi, my name is Matt Fink, and on this episode of On Subrogation, I want to talk with you about some ideas for maximizing your recoveries on blasting claims. And these are just claims where your insured's property has been damaged due to explosions from nearby construction activity or mining activity. There are 4 steps that I think need to be followed on all these claims to make sure that if the claim does go to a subrogation attorney, we have a strong case to file in court. Those 4 steps are inspecting the property, gathering other relevant information, identifying and putting all liable parties on notice, and retaining an expert. So step 1 is inspect, making sure we have a good baseline for the property's condition before the blasting began. This is a critical step, and oftentimes this step is taken as part of the coverage decision on the claim. The insurance company wants to make sure that the damage was from an explosion, right? So they will send someone out to take photographs. But this inspection needs to be done with an eye toward subrogation. They need to take a lot of photographs and up-close photographs. They need to move furniture, move wall coverings, and expose any hidden damage. This should be done for 2 reasons, really. 1, we want to know what's there. We want to know what damage has already occurred. And 2, we want to be able to have a good baseline for if there are further explosions. Oftentimes, blasting is a series of blasts over a period of days or weeks and not just one explosion. So having a good baseline is important on these claims. You should check with the homeowner to see if the property has been inspected recently for any mortgage applications or any other reason there would be photos taken of the home. The homeowner may have already taken photos of areas that they believe were damaged, and you want to get those photos in the file as well. So after you've inspected the property, you need to get some other information and gather all this information into the file. One of the most important things I think you need to put in the file is recorded statements from not just the reporting homeowner, but other people that have lived in the home at the time of the explosions, and trying to reach out and get names of neighbors. Getting them to be as descriptive as possible in what they felt and when they felt it will help your claim later. We need to know exactly when they felt the explosion. We need to know exactly what it felt like. And we didn't know if they can tell in what direction it came from. Having them use a lot of vivid detail will help our claim in court, because what someone feels is as admissible in court as what they saw or heard. And if we can have someone testifying that they felt a very strong vibration from this explosion, that can help our claim in 2 ways. 1, it can prove that the explosion they felt was very strong, but also it can help prove the strength of that explosion compared to other explosions that we might measure later. They can say, the explosion I felt first was stronger or less strong than the one I felt later on. And that, I think, would be admissible in court as a way of determining how strong the vibrations from an explosion were. These recorded statements and interviews are important for other reasons as well. You obviously want to ask, hey, do you know who was doing the work where this happened? The homeowner may have done quite a bit of your research for you and can tell you who the builder was, who the general contractor was, maybe even who was using the dynamite. Because as you'll see in our next step, that can be a long and arduous process sometimes. So that's another great reason to take these statements early from as many people as you can, as many neighbors as you can. Also, you want to try and gather important records, calling local authorities and seeing who might have a permit to be developing in the area. In the state of Tennessee, the activity of dynamite blasters is regulated to where they have to report if they're going to use dynamite. And so you'll have a record with the state fire marshal's office saying who all used dynamite on a certain day. And you can use that list to try and figure out which one might be the party you're looking to identify. And that is my next step. You want to identify who the blaster is. The blaster is usually who is going to be legally liable for the damage caused. But the blaster typically is working under a contract for a land developer, or there may be intermediaries between the main land developer and the blaster. And it's going to be really important to know those entities' names. They often change, they're often buying and selling one another, and sometimes it can feel a bit like the shell game from the carnival to try and figure out who is actually blasting on the day of the reported loss. If you don't know who the blaster is, you can always start at the top with who owns the land. Figure out who's on the deed, put them on notice, and try to go from there. Working your way down through the party that has the building permit and all the intermediary contractors involved. This can take many months, and I would say this is an important part that if you are not able to quickly determine who the blaster is, I would encourage you to get counsel involved or get some help in trying to make sure that you know that you're going after the right legal party and not some blaster that went out of business 2 years ago. The last thing I want to talk about is retaining an expert. Why would you want to retain an expert early in one of these claims? Well, one good reason is the blaster probably already has an expert who has set up equipment and measured the strength of the blast, and you don't want to rely on their testimony as to how strong the blast was when you're trying to prove a claim against the blaster. An expert in these cases is someone who's going to be able to testify to seismic activity and will be able to set up equipment in the insured's home and nearby to measure the strength of explosions that occur. Obviously, you won't be able to have this expert measure the explosion that caused the claim to come in to begin with, but if you can measure the subsequent explosions and how strong they were, then what we can do is use that evidence as well as the insured's testimony that we talked about getting earlier in the recorded statements. If the insured can say that the blast they felt on Monday was very strong, and we have measurements showing that the blast on Tuesday was borderline too strong, and the insured says, well, that blast was nothing compared to the one on Monday, then I think we have an inference that we can get in court that the Monday blast, even though we have no measurement of how strong it was, must have been over the threshold for how large of a blast would have to be to cause damage. So getting that seismic equipment set up is very important for these claims. So those are the 4 steps I think you should focus on when you see one of these new claims come into your queue. You want to make sure the property has been well inspected. You want to make sure that you've got recorded statements from not just the party reporting the claim, but from everyone in the house if you can. And you want to make sure those recorded statements have good detail on them about what each person felt and when they felt it. You want to make sure that all the liable parties have been identified and put on notice. If you're not absolutely certain that you have got the named blaster on your file, you want to get counsel involved. We may need to file suit early to do discovery and find out who all was involved with this particular construction project. And finally, you want to make sure that an expert has been retained and some equipment has been set up to measure seismic activity. Without having any scientific measurement of the strength of the blast, your insured saying the blast was really strong or felt like an earthquake is probably not going to mean enough in court to prove one of these claims. So biting the bullet, paying an expert to come out and set up some equipment and get some accurate measurements is really important. Do those 4 things, and if you need help, reach out to one of us at Rathbone, and we'll try to help you maximize your recovery on that blasting claim. Thank you, and have a great day.